You think cheating on a test means sneaking a peek at your friend's paper? That's amateur level. Some people take it to an entirely new dimension. Picture this: a student so dedicated to cheating that he trained a pigeon, yes, a real, living bird, to smuggle test answers into the exam room. And if that's not insane enough, someone else created an entire secret language, just so teachers wouldn't realize their notes were actually a cheat sheet. This isn't a movie script. These are real stories, pulled straight from Reddit, where students have gone to extreme, sometimes hilarious, and downright insane lengths just to avoid failing a test. We're talking about high-tech gadgets hidden in plain sight, ingenious loopholes, and even some methods so ridiculous they probably took more effort than just studying. But hey, at least they made history in the art of academic deception. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about cheating. And what better way to start than with one of the most mind-blowing cases I've ever heard. But before we dive in, don't forget to support Reddit True Vault by hitting that like button and subscribing. We bring you the craziest real-life Reddit stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Story number 1. Training a pigeon to get the answers. The narrator of this story, Alex, that I've seen a lot of weird things in my life. But watching a guy cheat on a test using a pigeon? That's something I'll never forget. It was junior year, and we were all stressed out over this impossible exam. You know the type, the kind where even if you actually studied, you still felt like you were about to fail. But there was one guy in our class, let's call him Pigeon Guy, who seemed way too relaxed about the whole thing. And as it turned out, he had a very unconventional plan. Halfway through the test, while the rest of us were sweating bullets, Pigeon Guy just leaned back in his chair and casually stretched. Then, like he was admiring the weather, he looked out the window. A second later, this tiny gray pigeon swooped down and landed on the windowsill. At first, I thought I was hallucinating from exam stress. But no, this bird was on a mission. Pigeon Guy reached out like he was adjusting his sleeve, grabbed a tiny rolled-up piece of paper from the pigeon's leg, and just kept writing like nothing had happened. And here's the craziest part. The teacher didn't even notice. I was sitting 2 seats away, watching this whole thing unfold in slow motion, completely speechless. I mean, I had heard of people writing notes on their arms or hiding cheat sheets in their calculators. But this dude actually trained a pigeon. And the worst part? It worked. The bird just flew off like it had more deliveries to make, and Pigeon Guy aced the test. I still don't know whether I should be impressed or deeply disturbed. But one thing's for sure, I will never look at pigeons the same way again. And if you think this guy was insane, wait until you hear about the next student who turned his glasses into a high-tech cheating device. Story number 2, the high-tech cheating glasses. I never considered myself a bad student. I just hated studying. So when finals rolled around, I had 2 options. 1, spend weeks cramming formulas into my brain. 2, engineer the most high-tech cheating device my school had ever seen. Obviously, I chose option 2. I had an old Nintendo DS lying around, and that's when it hit me. What if I turned my sunglasses into a secret display screen? A few days of tinkering, some trial and error, and I had it. A tiny screen from my DS, wired into my sunglasses. A hidden connection to my phone, feeding me all my notes. A carefully adjusted brightness level, just enough for me to read, but not enough for anyone else to notice. Now, here's the thing. You can't just walk into class wearing sunglasses without looking suspicious. So I came prepared. The moment I sat down, my teacher gave me a look. I didn't even flinch. My eyes are super sensitive to light. I muttered, like I had a genuine medical condition. And that was it. No questions. No suspicion. Just pure, undetected genius. The exam started. I tapped my phone, and boom, my entire cheat sheet appeared inside my lenses. Everyone else, sweating bullets. Me, casually reading my notes like I was checking a weather forecast. It was flawless. I aced the test, walked out like nothing happened, and no one ever suspected a thing. Looking back, I probably could have spent that time actually studying. But honestly, where's the fun in that? But not everyone needs high-tech gadgets to cheat. Some people, they just get insanely lucky. Story number 3, the printing error that passed an entire class. The narrator of this story, Mr. Patterson. I've been a teacher for years. I've dealt with cheaters, slackers, and kids who think Wikipedia is an original source. But nothing prepared me for the day my own test turned against me. It was midterms, and I had spent hours crafting what I believed to be an ironclad, no-nonsense exam. No loopholes. No easy questions. Just pure academic pain. I printed out the tests, stapled them together, and walked into class, fully expecting to watch my students suffer. And at first, everything was going according to plan. I handed out the papers, gave my usual eyes on your own work speech, and sat down at my desk. A few minutes in, I could see the panic settling in, furrowed brows, nervous pencil tapping, students glancing at the ceiling like divine intervention was coming. Typical. Then, I heard it. Not the sound of furious note-taking, not the deep sighs of despair. No. I heard silence. A deep, unsettling silence. I looked up. 50 kids, all hunched over their papers. But something was off. They weren't just writing, they were copying. Their eyes weren't darting around the room. They were all laser-focused on the last page. My stomach dropped. I got up, walked over to the nearest student, Nick, one of my more creative troublemakers, and without a word, I flipped his test to the last page. And there it was. The entire answer key. Printed. On every single test. I have no memory of what happened in the next 60 seconds. Only that I suddenly found myself in full damage control mode, frantically ripping the last pages out of every test I could get my hands on. Students held on to their papers like I was trying to steal their birth certificates. A few flipped their sheets over to hide the answers, as if I didn't already know they'd seen everything. But at that point, the damage was done. They knew. I knew they knew. And worst of all, they knew I knew they knew. I couldn't make them retake it. It was the school's mistake. And so, against every fiber of my being, I had to let it slide. Every single kid passed. Story number 4. The Thigh Cheat Sheet. A classic that never fails. The narrator of this story, Emily. Look, I'm not proud of this, but desperate times call for creative solutions, and nothing says low effort, high reward like writing answers on your own skin. It was my senior year, and I had one final exam standing between me and a summer free of academic nightmares. The problem? I had zero memory of what we were supposed to be tested on, and the idea of pulling an all-nighter? Absolutely not. So, I did what any resourceful, sleep-deprived student would do. I grabbed a pen and started writing. My thigh was my notebook, and let me tell you, I fit an unreasonable amount of information on there. Formulas? Check. Key terms? Check. Definitions? Crammed into whatever space was left. By the time I was done, my right leg looked like a conspiracy theorist corkboard, and I was ready to take on that exam. Now, the key to pulling this off is confidence. Walk in like nothing's up. Act normal. No fidgeting. No nervous glances. Just a model student, fully prepared for the test. Except, for the part where I actually knew the material. For the first half of the exam, it was smooth sailing. When I needed an answer, I'd casually cross my legs, peek down just enough to see my notes, and get back to writing like a pro. And then, my worst nightmare happened. I looked up, and Mr. Reynolds was staring right at me. Not the glance around the room kind of stare. No, this was the I know exactly what you're doing, and I dare you to make me call you out kind of stare. My heart stopped. My pen froze midair. I considered every possible excuse, but then nothing. No accusations. No interrogation. Just a slow blink, and then he walked away. I know he saw. I know he put 2 and 2 together. But let's be real. What was he gonna do? Ask me to roll up my pants so he could check my thigh? Yeah. No. He wasn't about to die on that hill. So, I finished my test, walked out like nothing happened, and never tried it again. But let's just say, I passed that exam with flying colors. And if you think this was sneaky, just wait until you hear about the students who turned fashion accessories into full-on cheat codes. Story number 5. The Rubber Band Cheat Code. Simple, sneaky, and genius. The narrator of this story, Lucas. Look, I was never the smartest kid in class, but I was good at problem solving, especially when the problem was, how do I pass this test without studying? That's how I, along with my 2 best friends, Ryan and Jess, came up with one of the simplest yet most effective cheating methods I've ever used. The rubber band cheat sheet. Now, back in high school, those thick rubber wristbands were everywhere. You know the ones, charity bands, sports team logos, random motivational quotes like dream big or believe in yourself. The kind of thing teachers were so used to seeing that they didn't even notice them anymore, which made them the perfect hiding spot. The night before our math test, we cut up tiny strips of paper, wrote down every formula we could fit, and carefully taped them to the inside of our rubber bands. The best part? Whenever we needed to see an answer, all we had to do was stretch the band slightly, take a peek, and let it snap back into place. It was flawless, or so we thought. Test day rolled around, and we sat there feeling like criminal masterminds. Every so often, one of us would casually stretch our wristbands, sneak a look, and jot down the answer like we actually knew what we were doing. No sweat, no suspicion. But then, Ryan screwed up. Instead of easing the band back into place, he let go too fast, and the rubber band snapped against his wrist with the loudest smack I've ever heard in my life. The entire class turned to look. Our teacher, Mrs. Carmichael, narrowed her eyes. "Everything okay, Ryan?" Ryan, bless his soul, panicked. Instead of playing it cool, he grabbed his wrist and blurted out, "YP. Just testing my reflexes." Absolute silence. Mrs. Carmichael stared at him for a long, painful moment, then shook her head and went back to grading papers. We all held our breath until the end of the test. When it was finally over, we walked out like we had just pulled off a high-stakes heist. And that's how $1 rubber wristbands saved my grade. Who knew something designed to inspire students would actually help them cheat their way to a passing score? But if you think this was clever, just wait until you hear about the guy who created an entire secret language just to cheat. Story number 6. The Sneaker Cheat Sheet. When fashion meets academic survival. The narrator of this story, Steven. I've seen people get creative when it comes to cheating, but my friend Ethan? That guy was on another level. Ethan wasn't the type to stress over exams. While the rest of us were pulling all-nighters, drowning in caffeine, and trying to shove a semester's worth of knowledge into our brains at the last minute, he was out here treating test day like a casual stroll in the park. And as it turned out, he had a good reason. Because while the rest of us were relying on whatever fragments of information we could remember, Ethan had the entire test bank on his damn shoes. Here's how it worked. The night before the exam, he meticulously wrote down every key formula, equation, and fact he could fit along the white rubber edge of his sneakers. The best part? He used a fine-tip white marker, which blended perfectly with his shoes under normal lighting. But under the desk? Tilt your foot at the right angle, and boom, instant cheat sheet. I didn't even notice it at first. We were sitting next to each other during the test, and everything seemed normal. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught him subtly tilting his foot, glancing down, and scribbling answers like it was just another Tuesday for him. I must have given him a look, because he smirked and whispered, "Relax. This isn't even my best work." I had no idea what that meant until 5 minutes later, when he casually took off his glasses, held them up to the light, and started reading the damn answers off the inside of the lenses. Turns out, he had written tiny notes on the inside of his glasses using a clear, fine-point gel pen. Under normal conditions, the writing was almost invisible. But when he tilted his glasses against the desk's black surface, the words lit up like a secret spy message. At this point, I was just watching in pure admiration. The guy had an entire academic survival kit built into his wardrobe, and no one, not even our teacher, Mr. Harris, had a clue. I don't know what grade he got, but judging by how relaxed he looked walking out of that room, it was higher than mine. Who knew that glasses and sneakers could be the ultimate test-taking weapons? But if you think this was genius, just wait until you hear about the guy who invented his own secret language just to cheat. Story number 7. The student who invented a whole language just to cheat. The narrator of this story, Mr. Thomas. Listen, I've been a teacher for years. I've seen every cheating method in the book, tiny notes scribbled on erasers, answers hidden under sleeves, kids stretching just to peek at someone else's paper. None of it surprises me anymore. But one day, I saw something so absurd that I still think about it to this day. It was midterm season, and I was patrolling the classroom, doing my usual stern, all-seeing, omnipotent teacher walk. You know, the one designed to make students second-guess all their life choices. Everything seemed normal. Kids were sweating, aggressively chewing their pencils, throwing desperate glances at the ceiling as if the answers were hidden in the fluorescent lights. Standard test-taking chaos. And then I saw her, Samantha, one of my brightest students. The kind of kid who had the brain power to ace this test if she just studied for 2 hours instead of, well, whatever it was she was doing. She was hunched over, scribbling like her life depended on it. But I noticed something odd. The edge of her notebook had weird symbols all over it. Not words, not numbers, symbols. I squinted. Was this some kind of secret code? Now, as a teacher, you develop a sixth sense for academic crimes. So I casually strolled over and leaned in, fully expecting to catch her red-handed with a cheat sheet. But when I looked at it, I had to stop and ask myself, am I looking at ancient Sumerian? No, really. It wasn't English. It wasn't shorthand. It wasn't even bad handwriting. It was a fully developed writing system that I had never seen in my life. So I did what any reasonable teacher would do. I stared at it. Then I stared at her. Then I stared back at it. Finally, I sighed and said, "Samantha, what exactly am I looking at?" And this girl, without even a hint of shame, smiled up at me and said, "Oh, that's my own language. I made it up so I could write down my notes without anyone understanding them." I had to walk away. I physically had to remove myself from the situation. Because here's the thing. I wasn't even mad. I wasn't disappointed. I was just deeply, deeply confused. This kid had the intelligence to create an entire new written language, but instead of using that brain power to actually study, she used it to commit light academic fraud. Unbelievable. I didn't call her out for cheating. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if it counted. If the school handbook doesn't explicitly say, "No making up your own written language to cheat," then is it technically against the rules? In the end, I let it slide. Not because I approved of it, but because if you have the mental capacity to invent an entire alphabet instead of just reading a textbook, maybe, just maybe, you deserve to pass. But not every weird test day moment comes from students. Sometimes, the teacher is the one making things weird. Story number 8. The Whispering Teacher. A gift, a trap, or just plain weird. The narrator of this story, Eric. I've seen a lot of weird things happen during tests. I've seen kids drop their pencils just to peek at someone's paper. I've seen people stretch so hard they nearly fell out of their chairs. But nothing prepared me for the day our teacher, Ms. Mia, decided to whisper the answers like she was in a damn spy movie. It started like any other test, pure, unfiltered suffering. The kind where even the kids who studied were reconsidering their life choices. I was sitting next to my friend Danny, and judging by how hard he was squinting at his paper, he had no clue what he was doing. Then, out of nowhere, Danny did something bold. He raised his hand. At first, I thought, wow, he's actually asking a question? Brave. But then I remembered, teachers don't actually help during tests. They just repeat the question back to you in a condescending tone and walk away. But Ms. Mia? She was built different. She walked over, leaned down so close I thought she was about to cast a spell, and in the softest, most hauntingly serious voice, she whispered, "B." I snapped my head up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. Did I hear that right? Did she just give him the damn answer? Danny didn't move. He just sat there, completely frozen, like a glitching NPC. His pencil hovered over the paper. He looked at me. I looked at him. We both looked at Ms. Mia. She was already walking away, like nothing had happened. At this point, I was convinced we had imagined it. Maybe we were just losing our minds from test stress. Maybe the lack of sleep had finally caught up to us. Then, very slowly, with the most confused expression I've ever seen, Danny circled B. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the test. When the bell rang, we walked out of class in total silence. The moment we stepped into the hallway, Danny turned to me and whispered, "Dude, what the hell just happened?" I had no answer. I just shook my head and muttered, "I think we just got haunted by a teacher." To this day, we never brought it up again. And if you think this was the weirdest thing to happen in an exam, just wait until you hear about the kid who used the most unexpected body part as a cheat sheet. Story number 9. The most insane cheat ever, when desperation goes too far. The narrator of this story, John. Listen, I've seen some pretty ridiculous ways people try to cheat on tests. Tiny notes hidden in sleeves, formulas scribbled on erasers, even the classic, pretend to sneeze while whispering the answer move. But nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed that day. This wasn't just creative cheating. This was borderline insanity. It was junior year, and we were in the middle of the most brutal biology exam of our lives. The kind of test where even the kids who studied were sweating bullets, and the rest of us were mentally preparing our excuses for when our parents saw the grade. I was sitting a few rows behind Tyler, a guy who was always a little too confident for someone who never took notes. I didn't think much of it until I noticed something strange. Every few minutes, Tyler would glance around, make sure no one was watching, and then ever so subtly tilt his head downward toward his lap. At first, I thought, okay, maybe he's just zoning out. But then I saw him pull at the waistband of his shorts, and that's when I realized this man had written his cheat sheet on his actual junk. I nearly choked on my own breath. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And yet, there he was, casually risking it all for a passing grade, sneaking peeks at his biological study guide in the most unholy way imaginable. Then came the moment everything fell apart. Tyler was mid-glance when our friend Josh, who had no idea what was happening, leaned over and whispered, "Hey, bro, what's number 5? Tyler panicked. His hand slipped. His desk lurched forward. And in that split second, the entire class turned to look, just in time to see Tyler frantically shoving his shorts back into place with the guiltiest face I've ever seen. Silence. Then, absolute chaos. People gasped, screamed, backed away like he had just committed an actual crime. Someone dropped their pencil. I heard a girl whisper, "Oh my God." Even the teacher, Mr. Bradley, looked like he was debating whether to investigate or pretend he had just gone temporarily blind. Tyler, he just sat there, frozen, knowing his academic career, and possibly his entire reputation, had just imploded. The aftermath? He didn't get caught, but he also didn't finish the test. I mean, how do you continue taking an exam when the entire class just witnessed you checking your private reference sheet? One thing's for sure, Tyler might not have gotten an A that day, but he definitely earned the title of most deranged cheater of all time. And there you have it. 9 of the most insane, ridiculous, and downright questionable cheating attempts ever pulled off in a classroom. Now, the real question is, have you ever seen, or attempted, a cheating method crazier than these? Be honest. We won't judge. Drop your best or worst test day stories in the comments, and let's see who has the wildest tale to tell. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the art of academic deception, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another insane Reddit story. This is Reddit True Vault, and trust me, we're just getting started.